Good afternoon. My name is Tony Zaccario. I am the CEO of Stretch Zone, the leaders in practitioner-assisted stretching. And I felt today would only be appropriate. I want to start off a little bit of a story that I think will resonate with a lot of you guys. And so to kind of set the stage, we're based out of Fort Lauderdale. The day is March 17th, 2020. And I remember it specifically. It happened to be a Tuesday. It was a nice, warm, sunny day in South Florida. Sun was shining, not a mask in sight. Everything was great. And we had a new prospect coming in, an area developer, a major area developer across the country. And we took him out to lunch at a local spot called Quarterdeck right down the street. And we're sitting in there, and about 10 minutes into lunch, I get a text from my downtown Philly franchisee. And I saved the text, and I looked back when I was thinking about this, and I found the actual text itself. And the text said, "We have closed all 3 stores until March 31st. State mandate, Jeff." Now, the background is Jeff is a little bit of a worrywart, and Jeff likes to gossip a little bit. So needless to say, Jeff is not the most reliable source of information. And so I'm sitting there at lunch, I'm thinking, surely Jeff just misread a mandate. They were trying to shrink down the size of everything. But there's no way that there would ever be a non-essential ban and a broad stroke across all the businesses. Just couldn't happen. So I texted him back and said, "Hey, Jeff, listen, I'm going to go ahead and I'll call you back after this meeting out of respect for the franchisee that we were with." Shortly thereafter, within the hour, I get calls from our franchisees in California, Chicago, Virginia, and probably within about 45 minutes, a waitress came to our table and said, "We just got news, Miami's shutting down all businesses and restaurants." And I'll never forget the distress on her face because, down here in South Florida, Miami goes first, then you kind of follow suit, and Fort Lauderdale will follow shortly thereafter. And I remember the distress on her face, and she looked up at me and she said, looked at us, she says, "Am I going to lose my job?" And I think for me and everyone sitting at that table, that's when the magnitude hit of what we were about to get into. And the reason why I say this story probably resonates with a lot of you, because everyone probably remembers the first place they were, or where they were when they first had obviously the impact of COVID. Needless to say, I had to excuse myself from the table. I went back into, and I think it was Michael was talking about the war room yesterday. We went back into the war room and we started figuring out what was what. Guys, there was a ton of questions. The questions were from all over the place of, how do I appropriately shut down? How do I know if my staff has COVID? My state's saying this, the city's saying this. I don't know if I should stay open or not. And we're trying to sift through everything. Needless to say, guys, it was chaos. And by Thursday of that week, 90% of our system was forced to shut down because of government mandates. So our revenue pretty much went to zero. So here I am at the ripe age of 26, in charge of a 70-store franchise system that, by the way, is a hands-on service in the middle of a pandemic. So now you're probably wondering how I got myself in this situation. So we're going to rewind a little bit. To give you guys a little bit of context, what is Stretch Zone? For those of you who have no idea, and stretching what, stretching who, how are we stretching? So guys, Stretch Zone is essentially the product and the service that we offer is practitioner-assisted stretching. We utilize a patented strapping system along with a nationally recognized training program to help position, stabilize, and isolate muscle groups, to design a stretching program that is unique to you and your goals and your needs, whatever they might be. Obviously where we are today, and to give you, obviously, to understand where the company is we're about 161 locations. We're opening up 2 more next week. We should be at 163. We started franchising in 2017. To date, we have yet to have a single store failure, and we're looking to add on probably and the goal is to shoot for 70 locations to open up this year. So business is definitely booming. To give you guys a landscape, which is kind of the theme of what we're going to be talking about today in Franchise Young Conference, average age of our entire company is 32 years old, and that is with Dan Collins, a part of this team as well. Excuse the number up a little bit. So guys, the purpose of the talk today, whenever I do a talk or when I've done a talk before or different roundtables, I always say I don't look for you guys to take my way as a comprehensive approach. I'm not dogmatic about the way I do things. I'm not up here to say that the way we've done is the right way. I believe there's a lot of different ways to get to success. But merely what I'm here today is to try to tell my story and hopefully help out others that are in the room that are emerging brands, and not so much about what we've done right, but also to learn a little bit through my journey as being a younger CEO, some of the things that we've done wrong. And so real quick, show of hands. I know we did this yesterday, but of the people that are still here, who are the franchisors in the room? Can you raise your hand? Keep your hands up real quick if you don't mind. Of the franchisor in here, who has over 5 locations? Okay, who has over 30 locations? Over 50? Okay, over 100? 150? 200? Look at you go. Guys, for those that put your hands down between 0 to 50, 50 to 100, these conferences are such a great opportunity to learn from someone who just went through a phase that you're about to enter into. And you got to learn from them. And so a lot of you guys are going to hear stories of our growth as a company. And the hope is that you just take a nugget or two with you that can either help you in your professional development or even your personal development. Okay? And so first to begin with, it's kind of how I got to be a part of Stretch Zone. And a lot of you guys, I was talking to people yesterday and they were asking me that to begin with, especially at such a young age. So prior to, guys, Stretch Zone, first off, was founded in 1999 by the founder, Jordan Gold, who's the one who created the patented strapping system and the stretch itself. He started by working on his grandfather named Pop Pop. Then he took it to the masses. He started working with one-off clientele, celebrities, athletes, whoever it might be, before taking it to, obviously, the storefront retail model. By the time I came across Stretch Zone, there was about 4 locations open. They were just about to open up their 5th. And really what I was doing prior to that is I was running operations for a timber company. And, the first lesson that I learned kind of goes with the story in which I came about Stretch Zone. At the time I was up in Birmingham, Alabama. I was shocked to meet however many people were actually from Birmingham, Alabama throughout this entire conference. But I was up in Birmingham, Alabama running timber company. My wife was from South Florida originally. She was waiting to get into physician assistant school. She's a PA. We're doing the long distance thing, going back and forth, and one day she calls me up and she says, hey, Tony, I'm not going to be able to make it up. I have to go to this training. I think I found a really cool job called Stretch Zone. I said, Stretch who? And so I tried looking it up. There's no website. There's nothing. There's a few wonky videos of Jordan on YouTube stretching people, and that's about it. So me running operations for a timber company, I asked Chelsea, I said, hey, Chelsea, if it's a mandatory training you have to go through, what are you getting paid? Surely they're paying you for mandatory training. And she goes, well, they're not. And part of my French, but I go, Chelsea, I don't know what kind of Craigslist shit you found, but you need to run away from it. And needless to say, she didn't listen to me. She came on board, fell in love with the product. She saw the difference it made firsthand with the clients themselves. Fast forward a few months, she was telling me all about the issues around the business. That we didn't know how to price it. They didn't know how to structure it. They didn't know the ops behind the business. They didn't know how to sell it. Some of the floors had tile. Some of them had carpet. People were slipping all over the place, but the product was so good. And you talk about intellectual capital. Is the product was so good, people kept coming in because that's the difference it made on people's lives. So Chelsea would kind of tell me about all these little grievances and just the normal venting between a spouse over time. And lo and behold, one time I'm visiting Chelsea down in South Florida. And, the way to get to South Florida is you got to drive from Birmingham to Atlanta. Atlanta down to South Florida is the best way. I'm sitting on the tarmac, and all of a sudden I hear someone next to me start talking about Stretch Zone. And I go, well, that's a little bit odd because there's only 5 locations, tight-knit company. It happened to be one of the original employees of the company. We get talking about Stretch Zone. He's telling me about, obviously what their plans are. I talked to him about what I was doing at the time, and a little bit later in the flight, it's not that long of a flight, it's only Atlanta to Fort Lauderdale. A little bit later in the flight, he goes ahead and says, hey, listen, if you're running operations for Stretch Zone, what would you do differently? And the honest truth is, I let him have it because I just wanted my wife to have a better job in the meantime before getting to PA school. And so we get off the plane, and all of a sudden, he goes, listen, we'd love to have you on board. I really think you need to meet Jordan, my partner, to go ahead and really help out the business. I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So I remember getting back to Alabama, and what he was able to tell me, I knew the impact it made on people's lives. I knew about the IP, the intellectual property. I knew about the patent trapping system. But what I didn't know were the numbers behind the business. And that's what something that he was able to tell me. And so I remember driving around in Alabama, because all you do in Alabama is drive, by the way, especially in timber. Nothing's close. Is I remember driving and doing the math and thinking about the scalability, thinking about the opportunity. And I realized if they're onto something, they could be onto something very special. Called him up, checked him out, met Jordan, and the rest is history. And guys, the reason why I bring this up is morely for the young professionals in this room and also the business owners as a whole and the mindset you have to have as a business owner, and especially for the young professionals or the newer franchisors in the room, is, guys, if you ever asked me back when I was a a younger kid. If you ever asked me before if I'd ever run a timber company, I'd say you're out of your mind. If you ever asked me that I'd be running a stretch company, I'd be like, you've lost your mind. But guys, the key is recognizing opportunity. And what I find, and I'm in a unique spot because obviously I am a young professional, still a young CEO for the past few years. And also I lead a very young team. And the thing I see and the issue that I see a lot of times when young professionals are coming into the workforce is they feel like they are entitled to go ahead and find their dream job the second they get into the workforce or after spending 6 months within an organization. And far too often, what a lot of people don't realize is you guys have to walk through 10 different doors to go ahead and find the door that's just right for you. And it starts with being able to recognize opportunity. And that's what was critical for me and still is critical to this day when looking out for business opportunities. And so the only way you can recognize opportunities full circle is it starts with goal setting. And one of the things I can't stand, and especially for the younger people in here and probably everyone, is you hear this idea, this mantra when you're going through college of you don't have to figure your stuff out now. You guys can go ahead and wait till later, right? You have plenty of time to figure out what you're going to get, what you're going to do. Guys, I'm here to tell you that the whole, and society's done a disservice around the idea about goal setting because that's nonsense. And the best way to portray this, and I always talk about this with our teams and the young professionals and the young team that we have that we're trying to develop into leaders, is who here has ever played a game 5-card draw in poker? Please. For those of you who have never played 5-card draw before, it's a very, very, very simple game. You get 5 cards. Right, you have one time to go ahead and exchange as many cards you want, or up to 3, depending on how you're playing. And the idea is to get the best hand in poker. Simple as that. And the situation I always give is, let's say I go ahead and I get 2 queens, 2 sevens, and a 3. So which card am I likely to go ahead and exchange for? On the back, the 3. Put the suits aside. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. So I'd exchange the 3. Guys, the only reason why I know to exchange a 3 is because I know the objective of the game. I know the goal that I'm trying to achieve. If this game was Rummy 500, or other card games, there might be some inherent value of having a lower card in your hand. But those are different goals and different objectives. This is no different than life, except life, every single card is some different component or aspect of your life. A card can be a relationship. A card could be a job. A card could be finances. A card could be a situation or a new struggle. And guys, make no mistake about it, I'm not here to tell you that everyone got dealt a fair hand. I'm not here to tell you that you could control what kind of hand you got dealt. But you damn well do have control about what cards you decide to pick up and which cards you decide to put down. And so that's my point about setting goals and recognizing the opportunities that are in front of you. And for me, what resonated with Stretch Zone is that, guys, Stretch Zone, I saw something where it's unique. There's intellectual property, has direct impact on people's lives. It's something that caters to a wide market. I saw the scalability potential. Forget about franchising at the time. I just recognized something that was scalable. It was simple. For me at that time, it was the best opportunity to go ahead and achieve my goal of having the biggest positive impact as many people as possible across the world. Whether that's in here in this room or the clients that we treat every single day that we have come inside our locations. So that's when I decided to come on Stretch Zone. Afterwards, kind of the journey from 5 to 60, because I came on board, we have 5 locations. What we were trying to figure out was a proof of concept behind the storefront model. You know, we hadn't figured it out. There were still a lot of inconsistencies that we were trying to sort through. And going through it, the next lesson I really learned was, and another thing for all the young professionals in here is, and something we tell our team, our leadership team, is, guys, don't just think things through. And that's so important. And the one thing that kind of always resonates with me, and Ryan, you and I were talking about it yesterday, and Ryan's take was, I think every franchisor has to go through this mistake. And my hope is that you hear all of our mistakes and you don't go through this mistake. And for the franchisors that have made this mistake, don't go and make the mistake again, which we probably already have. Is when we were first early on, you know, we're completely organic. We've gotten to 161 locations without any kind of raised capital, nothing, no outside investment. Some would say the hard way. But ultimately, it's the one thing that you go through when building a franchisor, and for those of you that are between 0 and 20 locations, 0 and 50 locations, is I can distinctly remember one time an area developer came in, we took him through Discovery Day. This person didn't align with our core values. They didn't care about the culture. They loved the product. They have plenty of capital, right? But they didn't have an operator. They didn't have all the intangibles that would lead to a successful franchisee. But, and you don't have to show your hands, but there's probably some of you in here, but that $250,000 development fee looked really good, and payroll at the time looked really scary. And so it was one of those decisions where we thought it was a good decision to bring that person on without thinking it through, and the component of, guys, this person will end up sucking away most of your time, and it is a problem that you're going to have to deal with down the road. So that was definitely a lesson that we learned, not just think it, but think it through. After that, from about 5 to 60 locations, we didn't start franchising. At first, we did corporate locations as a proof of concept. We were always honed in on the unit level economics of the business. We firmly believe that, in franchising, it really is a win-win, and that's why I love the industry so much. You're successful and the franchisees are successful, first and foremost, and period. You got to get that through your head. And so we understood that if we could make a successful business model, regardless of the aptitude of the owner or whatever it might be, if they could follow a system, it would work. And this is before we even considered franchising. This is more so when we were trying to scale the corporate locations, which got up to 12 at one point. When we started franchising in 2017, you have to do the friends and family, and obviously people started to grow their own units organically, which is a great indicator of not just financial success, but also that they enjoyed the experience of working with us as a franchisor. Then we got into 2019 at about 60 locations. And ultimately, the graph you're seeing here, guys, is the average monthly revenue without the actual numbers. So nobody jump on me for an FPR. With that being said, in about October of 2019, we were running into an issue, and really towards the end of September. The legacy franchisees were becoming disgruntled. We weren't upholding our end of the bargain as a franchisor. We weren't supporting them the proper way they needed to be. And ultimately, we decided to make a change, and the ex-partner who was CEO at the time departed the company. And by the way, guys, when you're in startups, titles are worthless, and that's why I formally got tapped in as CEO in October 2019. And I thought to myself, I said, how are we going to change the tide? How can we change the momentum? And the way I figured it out was saying, hey, for all these disgruntled Zs, that they're disgruntled because they feel like they're not being heard. They feel like they're not being listened to. They obviously think that they can do it better. And so my whole mentality was, we truly need to create a franchisee-first culture. We need to create a franchisee-first organization. And that's what's most critical. And so I laid out this beautiful plan. I figured these are the 3 pillars behind a franchisee-first culture. We needed to let the franchisees know that we did trust them. We needed to let the franchise know that we were listening to them, not just hearing them, which are 2 vastly different things. And the third thing we need to do is we need to have patience with our franchisees. And so I laid out this beautiful plan. I said, man, what better way to show our franchisees this whole plan of how we're going to change the momentum of the system than at an owner's meeting. Owner's meeting was in November of that year. And actually, funny enough, having flashbacks, the owner's meeting was actually in this room at the time. And the stage was over there, and it was all down this way. And I will tell you, the environment today in this conference was much more welcoming and much more friendly than it was at the time. So we had the owner's meeting here, and I got up on stage and I said, here's the plan of action. It was a great owner's meeting. And at the end, most people were on board. And to my dismay, though, there were still a disgruntled few who doubted me, doubted my experience, doubted my leadership. They thought that I wasn't capable of doing it. And what really resonated with me is understanding that guys, I think that there's definitely a dichotomy of perspective that exists within organizations, not just franchising organizations. Meaning, a lot of young professionals, and I've probably heard this far too often, is for those that are managing the young professionals, and I'm guilty of it as well. Who here has ever said someone or evaluating someone to move up in the company said they're too green, they're too inexperienced, there's not enough gray hair, right? And everyone's heard that expression either as a recipient or you're giving it. On the flip side, young professionals are saying, I just want an opportunity. I just want to be heard. I have great ideas. This is what I think I can do. Guys, both perspectives are qualitative. Both perspectives are detrimental to an organization. And I firmly believe that. And so what I realized at that owner's meeting is that no matter how good of my plan was, no matter how thought out it was, no matter how pretty it sounded, talk is cheap. And the best lesson I learned through that, which I can give to all the young professionals in here and to everyone is, and also when helping manage young professionals, is guys, never confuse effort with results. They are 2 vastly different things. And so many time and time again, and maybe you guys have had performance reviews where you sit down with someone and everyone's heard the tried and true thing, but I'm trying really hard. Guys, it doesn't cut it. And the reason why I think it's so valuable, especially when managing young professionals, for those that have challenges with it, it's so inherently valuable because, guys, the proof is on the scoreboard. That's what matters, nothing else. It's not about how I feel about you. It's not about how much you're trying or your feelings or anything of that nature. And so I realized that I had to show out. And so to convince all these disgruntled owners, I realized that I had to prove it in the average revenues, and things had to uptick. And so ultimately, as we started 2020, things started to look up. We set our system average revenue record in January that month. We're going out there. Most of the franchisee system is happy as can be. They see the momentum. They see the traction that we're getting. And again, to my dismay, there was still the group of disgruntled owners that were just naysayers. And one of the things I learned, and this is one of the most challenging components for especially young professionals that are growing in their professional career, or maybe for those of you that are in this room that's first time being a VP, director, CEO, C-level executive, first time owning a franchise, first time being a franchisor, is I realized that no matter what I did, no matter what I said, these people weren't going to be happy. And I was so determined to the point where I would fly out to all these disgruntled franchisees. I would literally fly to their location. I'd say, how can I help you? What can I do to better assist you? And of course, there was never a good enough answer. And we all know franchisees like this. And the hard lesson I learned at my young age, especially as emerging franchisors, I found myself devoting not all my time, but most of my time and too much of my time to the 2% of franchisees that never want to get on board, which wasn't fair to the 98% of franchisees that are trying to better their business. And what you guys have to realize is your time is valuable as leaders in your organization. And you've got to do justice to the people that want to get better and have the tough conversations with those that don't. And the one line in saying that kind of got me over that hump was, you're not always a hero in someone else's narrative. It's no fault of your own. Meaning this, you could have the most well thought out plan. You could do the due diligence. You could talk to franchisees. You could get input. And by the way, you could be 100% accurate on the decision. But guys, to the legacy franchisees, whereas the wild, wild west, right, you're stifling creativity. You're making it harder for them to do business. They will vilify you to no fault of your own. And that's when I learned that can't bother me. And ultimately, I got to do what's best for the brand no matter what. Okay? So after that, we started climbing up. And the one piece, obviously February is a good month. I think you can see March is when COVID started to happen. As we're going through this, guys, and when trying to build this franchisee first culture, it is important to note, when creating these pillars of trust and when creating these pillars of obviously listening and patience, those are kind of interesting takes. When I say trust a franchisee, a lot of people say, well, what do you mean? Guys, trusting a franchisee, I boiled it down to this. At one point in time, you trusted your franchisee. If you didn't, you wouldn't have signed the franchise agreement with them. And also, I'm a firm believer, it's probably a different take than a lot of franchisors, there has to be some degree of autonomy down at the franchisee level. Meaning you have to give them the freedom to go ahead and make the tactical decisions at the ground level to better the business, which ultimately betters the franchisor. Now, you have to put guardrails around that, and to do that, there has to be a level of accountability and honesty. They have to have as much ownership in the brand as you do. Now, guys, accountability works both ways. Accountability works one way to the franchisee and also to the franchisor. If you're not holding up your end of the bargain, you need to say so. And so many franchisors are afraid to admit that to their franchisees because they're worried about the recourse that's going to happen with the franchisees. Okay? So that's trust. Listening. How do you listen to your franchisees? Who here has an FAC? Quick show of hands. Franchise Advisory Council. Guys, you need to set up the platforms. If you don't, and by the way, for the emerging franchisors in the room, I think it is paramount that you have FACs. They help you tremendously with certain initiatives that you're trying to roll out. And any decision is almost a collective decision. They are the voice of the franchisee. So the first thing we got to do is set up an FAC so that they can be heard. We also started a good idea fund throughout the company. And the reason why I say listen to franchisees is that, guys, they have good ideas sometimes, which might be shocking. And so the whole thing, and the reason why I say that is because I used to talk to franchisors and be like, no, we know everything. And it's like, well, no, you don't. And one of the things we say throughout Stretch Zone is everything's about communication. If a franchisee has a good idea, please communicate it, which is why we started the Good Idea Fund, where we give a Visa gift card, whether it was a stretcher, a front desk, a franchisee. If they had an idea that translated into the whole system and the whole company, we would go ahead and activate the Good Idea Fund. And what it did is it allowed those creative franchisees, those entrepreneurial franchisees, a conduit in which they can relay those good ideas instead of just activating them, which is ultimately to the detriment of the organization. And so when we started this, you might find that 9 times out of 10, right, they're going to say something you've already thought of, you've already tested, but you already have an answer for. But at least they're feeling heard and they're feeling listened to. The next thing is, 1 times out of the 10, guys, they might bring something to the table that's going to benefit the entire system, which ultimately benefits you. So to create this franchisee-first culture, which we were focused on in Q1 and Q4 the year prior, is you obviously had to trust, you had to listen, and the last thing was being patient. Guys, franchisees are going to make mistakes. And let's be clear, for many of them, this was their first ever business venture. And for all of us that have ever been their first business venture, you guys made a lot of mistakes too. You have to be patient with them throughout their business ownership journey and, more importantly, their franchisee journey. So this is all going down in Q1. We started gaining traction, and obviously COVID hit, which brings me back to the story that I started with at the beginning. When COVID hit, it led to another thing of, guys, we were focused on really just relaying positivity. Positivity was so powerful. And as COVID went along, you guys can see positivity was very hard to find around that time right there. But guys, we knew that we needed to go ahead and set up the proper support systems for our franchisees. Our franchisees needed us then, and we needed them. So what we did is we did twice weekly calls to go ahead and help educate them on all the acronyms that have become far too regular in our vocabulary, PPP, PPE, everything else like that. And so that's what we focused on. Then we had our whole restructuring, and you want to talk about innovation. We had to innovate a whole reopening campaign. And ultimately, to our relief, the system quickly bounced back. And obviously got back to more of a V-shaped recovery, which you see here. And so what's impressive about COVID and when looking back on COVID itself is one thing that really helped us was this organic mindset, or I call what is an organic mindset. When you're growing the organization completely organically without any kind of outside investment, COVID got very simple in one simple component or one equation. It's cash in and cash out, right? At that point in time when you don't know the future holds, and guess what? Cash in needs to be greater than cash out. Or as close, or you try to minimize that delta as much as possible, which for all the leaders in the organization is called making tough decisions. And more importantly, what I learned out of that and what I observed via the franchisees, via the young leaders in the organization, is just how many people are scared to have the tough conversations. And what I mean by that is, listen, we had to go through furloughs. We got everyone back and everyone retained and came back. But we had those tough conversations early. We knew it was going to be hard. I mean, these are people that have really helped build the organization and build the company from day one. And we explained the why, and we explained that, hey, listen, there are benefits from the federal and state level. On the flip side, I did see other franchisees from other concepts. I did see other business owners that waited too long to have that tough conversation to their own demise. And this isn't just in moments of crisis. Guys, for the young professionals in here, you're going to have hard conversations. For the franchisors and the emerging franchisors in here, you're going to have hard conversations. Be transparent with your franchisees. If there's a tough conversation to be have it. Do not shy away from it. The problem will not go away. I can promise you that. Okay? So that definitely was learned throughout COVID. And part of that in this organic mindset, I like to say, is when you're focused on cash in versus cash out, and the simplicity of it is, one of the points that, and during that time, right, there's opportunity for all kind of ownership, acquisition. And David and them talked about it yesterday to where, equity is very expensive. And I'm not talking about from the point of the buyer. I'm talking about from the point of the seller. Guys, you can do it organically. And I think whenever anyone in here is considering raising capital, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, is the real question needs to be why. And I think the conversation about raising capital, private equity, strategic partnership, whatever it might be, I think the conversation needs to change a little bit. I think the conversation needs to be more focused on not necessarily the praise around when someone has a round of funding or someone raises capital. I think there needs to be more of a conversation about why and why they decided to do it. What was it deployed for? What was it utilized for? And guys, philosophically, I really don't want you to confuse this. I am not against funding. I'm not against raising capital as a franchisor. I'm about doing what's best for the business and having your intentions in mind. And what I hope that I can show you is that you can make it to past the emerging phase and you can make it to 150 plus locations performing well if you do it the right way. Now, that might not be the case for a lot of businesses. It might be more capital intensive, and you might go ahead and need that. And guys, by the way, we might go ahead and need it down the road. But ultimately, that decision is going to be made on what's best for the company, not necessarily what's sexy, what's cool, what everyone else is doing, what you should do to try to help get to the next stage or make it a little bit easier. And ultimately, guys, we've decided not to take on any equity to date. And as we entered into 2021, we had an outstanding year of average revenues continue to go up and increased by about 30% from the beginning of the year. And part of this was that groundwork that we laid into it. Part of it was that franchisee first culture. And part of it is to go and show you guys that there is a right way to go about franchising, and it starts with putting your franchisees first. I think ultimately, guys, young professionals have a lot to offer organizations. Might be a little bit biased when I'm saying that. But I do truly believe they have a lot to offer with organizations. Sometimes they just need an opportunity to show that. And on the flip side, guys, for those of you that have challenges when trying to manage younger professionals, I think that if you just go ahead and trust them, you listen to them, and you have a little bit of patience with them, they'll go ahead and prove you wrong and show you what they can really do and have an impact on your organization. Thank you.